Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, Flight at the Museum Special, where I talk about the planes in the book. More really ancient plane, let's go, starting with the SFW Rathenau Nimbus. Does this technically counts as a flying wing? The Nimbus was a joint venture between SFW and Rathenau, an early precursor to their nation's eventual alliance, the 8th iteration of the flying wing owed its design. After putting the error into trial and error, they not only finally achieved a flyable plane that would stay in the air, but they managed to create the most stable, easy-to-fly plane in history. The unique wing, with a variable angle of attack along its length, made the craft so stable, the pilot was said to be able to get out and take a stroll along the wing. It was also easy to land, normally the riskiest part of flight. This made the Nimbus, or V-wing, a popular aircraft among flight schools and as glider clubs' first powered aircraft. Several militaries evaluated the craft, but all found that in the balancing act between maneuverability and stability, it overly emphasizes the latter. After the war, some truly desperate pilots strapped guns to their old Nimbuses in defense against bandits and other unorganized threats, an effort that has achieved limited success. The most effective paramilitarized versions make use of the stability by mounting a precision rifle. This thing is 100% real. It's called the Dundee .8, a unique looking aircraft that's so stable. When the British War Office evaluated the design, they gave up because it was so stable that it was hard to turn. For some reasons they also didn't bought any to train their pilots with, but I guess that's because it's too damn safe. Also it's just really slow, and doesn't really have a lot of engine power, but hey, this is a plane in Flying Circus that actually won't try to kill you. Other than that, it is very tough, gives a rather clear view to the pilot, extremely stable, plenty of fuel to last, and it has a single precision rifle to snipe enemy plane down, because if you try to dogfight in this thing, don't do that. The engine is not very reliable though, but considering its absurdly cheap price, it's well worth it for any sharpshooter pilot around, if your wallet has a hole in it. As for its variant, there's the big gun variant that can be armed with anything from heavy cannon, recoilless cannon, to a freaking punt gun. I do not recommend this one because you will be slow as hell. Spend your money on better things. There's also the big engine variant, which could have either an air-cooled Braun UL or ULK engine, more speed, more power. What's not to like? The SFW Rathenau Nimbus, practically the safest thing to fly, but it's also just as harmless to the enemies you might be facing too, so remember that. Next, there's the Teicher Fuchs, when you are really out of options. As the cracks started to show in the UWF war effort, Teicher were tasked with producing an emergency scout to supplement the MIG J-79 and upcoming Ritter Model C. Their valiant effort produced a fast scout whose star-shaped struts allowed the elimination of finicky flying wires. The cost of interrupter gears forced the gun into a housing above the wing, but on paper the Fuchs could rival even Gothe's new Teicher Cobra MA. Once in service, however, the Fuchs was loathed. The poor seating and ill-placed wing almost completely blocked forward visibility, the bulky engine frustrated attempts to rearm, and the tail was hastily redesigned due to stability problems. Within months, Fuchs squadrons had triple the desertion rate of other units. After Fokker captured the Teicher facilities, they too were wowed by the unique wing arrangement and sophisticated lines, especially as with Fokker engines, the gun could finally be moved to a better position. Under Fokker ownership, the star struts became Teicher's signature feature. A fair number of Fuchs survived the war in secondary regions where they were a reasonable match for older fighters, and with fisher communities in their Fuchs floatplane variant. So, remember a very long while ago when I was talking about the Schwarzlos machine gun and its inability to be synchronized due to the long time delay between the pull of the trigger and the bullet leaving the barrel, and I showed an image of what Austria-Hungary did to overcome that issue. This is the plane, the Hansa Brandenburg DI. They literally just figured that if the machine gun can't be put in the hull, just put it on the wing. Problem is, unlike a light machine gun, even by World War I standard, this thing is not light, so the housing needs to be very secure or else it might just break and fall straight onto the pilot's face, which means more weight. You can start to see the problem and why nobody else did this when they can avoid it. And yes, on its stat, it looks good, it's fast, agile, good enough power, durability, it looks decent. Then you realized because the gun is mounted in such a weird place, it has zero accuracy at long range, and the pilot needs to get out of their seat to fix it if it ever jam. Also it has high radiator, so get ready for a faceful of boiling water. It's also kinda expensive, so you can't even get it cheap. As for its variants, there's the early version with flying rudder. It's a more agile version with higher handling, but it's far less stable. Fuchs variant just add float, allowing you to land on water, and then there's the Fokker one, Bertha 1466 engine for more power, and moving the gun back to the fuselage with interrupter gears. Now this is a plane that's well worth its price tag, and could easily carry you to the modern flight era. The Teicher Fuchs, limited by the tech of its era and necessity of its time, might just be able to be saved with some changes to face brand new challenges. And for the last plane of this episode, there's the Weiss Rakbarsch, too much of a good thing indeed. After the widespread introduction of the gun synchronizer and the dawn of the dogfight, lift became the overriding concern for designs of the mid to late 1580s, deeply outclassed by the new Cobras and Model C. The Fokker Kingdoms offered a 100,000 thaler prize to its subjects for the plane with the fastest 180-degree turn. The greatest fruit of this competition was probably the invention of the ornithopter, but the entry of Mejka Weiss was also significant. A fisher from the south coast, Weiss had been inspired by the many rows of fins on flying fish. While her all-moving wing experiments were unsuccessful, she struck upon the idea of the quadruplane scout. Her entry, the Rakbarsch, provided stunning maneuverability, and she was on the verge of being awarded the prize before combat trials showed a fatal flaw. The lightly built plane disintegrated under fire or in sharp dives. By the time the issues were fixed, the Macchi castor oil embargo sank the machine for good. Many believe that Fisher defense squadrons being issued the survivors was a twisted punitive measure. This plane might be slow, but it can turn amazingly well, especially with its rotary engine to dogfight against practically anything. It even has twin machine guns, so what's the problem? Most plane in Flying Circus has at least 20 plus max strain because it lets them handles at least 2 g-force, which can be incurred from dogfight or pulling up hard. This also means that the Rakbarsch can only handle 1 g only, which means it can't turn as hard as other planes, and not just that, if it turns too hard by accident, your plane will go balkanized. It doesn't matter that it's cheap when it can't do what it does best. Also, it has treated paper for wings. So yeah, it's kinda crap, which is why almost all its variant is about fixing it. Rakbarsch 2 add wire root, this immediately massively improves the plane. Rakbarsch 3 also add in canvas skin and wing, it's a tad heavier now, but it's at least no longer flammable. There's also the Fisher modification variant, which is any variant with float. It's self-explanatory. The Weiss Rakbarsch, once has its issue fixed, is one hell of a cheap dogfighter, but before that, don't turn too hard. And that's all for these 4 airplanes. Right, I guess I really have to talk about that. Braun GA Goulash Canon, what the actual fuck? The GA was an early attempt at a twin-engine biplane. The forward engine drove a central propeller, and the rear engine, turning in the opposite direction, drove 2 wing-mounted propellers by chains. It received its nickname, Field Kitchen, when the cooling of the rear engine proved inadequate, resulting in the side-by-side cockpit being blasted incessantly with hot air. The GA was one of the first aircraft to be fitted with a radio transceiver, but power generation proved inadequate for extended operations. The primitive windmill generator was insufficient to charge the battery at its nominal top speed. Crews were advised to hold a shallow dive if the batteries ran low. After a few years of questionable service, all known examples of the machine were recycled. The Braun GA would have been entirely forgotten in the post-war world, save for a quirk of fate. In 1615, members of the Flying Circus Checkmate organized a salvaging operation of the still blazing Braun offices in Lomond, an elaborate operation involving an asbestos airship and 36 highly trained crew. Hoping for blueprints such as the Braun DC, they emerged with this. Determined to get their money's worth, the Goulash Canon's radio now serves to coordinate the massive squadron, and more importantly as punishment duty for disobedient pilots. Do not fly this thing, I beg you, just don't. It's literally so slow, it has problem powering its expensive ass radio with windmill. Unless you fly at high altitude or dive just to recharge the battery. It's also absurdly expensive for something this shit. Yes, it's tough as nail, but it doesn't matter because it costs 20 goddamn thaler. Worse, basically every single existing Braun GA is gonna be a fucking new one because not a single one exists before 1615 due to the fact that they all got scrapped for being so shit. This plane is basically just a disappointment. It's even listed so in the fucking plane pack. Please don't use it. Also, it has a variant called Aerial Laboratory, which replaces both engines with a single tractor Rober Herausforderer engine. This one at least has an itch of being a functioning radio operating plane at extremely high altitude. Add in a camera, and it would work as an excellent spy plane. But in its base form, you do not want to get scammed flying the Goulash Canon, just, no. And that's all for these 3.5 airplanes, from the extremely stable SFW Rathenau Nimbus that's good for beginners and not good for fighting, the over-engineered Teicher Fuchs that really needs some changes to be effective, the quad-winged Weiss Rackbarsch that can turn really well if it doesn't break first, and this fucking thing. What comes next now that the flight at the museum plane pack is finished? Well, First Flight's plane pack expansion just came out a while ago, depicting 100% original plane design for each playbook, so you won't have any nightmare that any of these airplanes could be real, well except for this one. Anyway, that's all for now and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.